Hello and welcome to the LCS Dome, powered by Alienware. For the LCS Countdown, where for 30 minutes we scrutinize roster swaps and have a classic discussion of good and evil before we hit Game 1 at 1 p.m. Mark's already celebrating 4th of July. Thank you all so much for joining us here on this holiday, celebrating independence. I'm hoping that we have some action-packed games, some fireworks to happen on the Rift and not just over there on Mark's monitor. But with that, I think it's important for us to pull up the standings and take stock of the league, see where everyone stands coming into the day. We do have that all-important battle for second today as FlyQuest and Evil Geniuses, two of our 4 teams in that clump there, going up against each other in Game 3 of the day.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see which of these, second-place teams start pulling away and making improvements getting into the last part of the first round robin. CLG dropped a little bit yesterday against Cloud9, so with FlyQuest and EG playing, I'm really excited to see what happens.
Yeah, just a half game back there, and as you mentioned, Cloud9 still well ahead of the pack, 7-0. We can update our counter. It's now been 84 days since C9 has lost a game, so we are creeping ever closer to that triple-digit mark.
We cherish those days because their games are really exciting. It doesn't get old watching them stomp teams.
No, it really doesn't. They're crazy exciting. Probably, sorry.
Yeah, I will say, last split we had how long can the mid turret survive? And now it's just like, when will Cloud9 actually lose a whole game?
Yeah, we're moving that bar. We're increasing the bar for the rest of the teams in the LCS. You got one turret last split. Can you get a whole game? Who knows? With that divide, though, in the standings, we see that the bottom teams, actually, the bottom 3 teams, have been making some moves after a lackluster start. They want to join that conversation for top half of the league. Now, we got to look at Poom and Contracts just yesterday for 100 Thieves in their game versus Golden Guardians. Unfortunately, it resulted in a loss. Probably come to you first. Thoughts on the way that those guys showed up?
Yeah, so I thought Poom had a decent showing. We saw him little clips in lane where he actually seemed to be performing well. He had some good mechanics, and he actually had some good roams in the early game. But obviously in their GGS match, the enemy took control. Golden Guardians pretty much just choked them out, and they weren't really able to come back because their jungle support synergy isn't there yet. Poom's still very new, so he's probably very uncomfortable in a situation where the entire map is dark. So we didn't get to see as much as I would like, and bet we'll see more in the upcoming games.
There is one area I would have loved to see them perform a bit better that I don't think new synergies necessarily fall under, which is playing against these globals like the Gallios and Twisted Fates. TF was banned, but Galio, kind of the same idea where if you try to jump on somebody, you can expect that global to react. They never once respected that, and that really hurt them.
That, as well as the fact that it felt like Contracts got pushed out of what we've seen out of his comfort zone so far in Academy. He's been playing Graves and Nidalee for the most part, and some Trundle. He got put on Volibear, and it feels like they're trying to get him to play more of that style that Meteos was playing with the Olafs and Trundles so far. So we'll see if they try and change up their play style a little bit to integrate the newer players more.
Now we got our first look at 100 just yesterday, but it was last week that we got our first look at the changes Immortals made to their roster, bringing up their Academy roster to play in the LCS. And in fact, it turned out real well for them in the first game of the weekend, picking up a win and ultimately going 1-1 with their loss against Cloud9. But Crumbs, thoughts on the way this Immortals roster has stepped up and moving into the middle of the split, how you expect them to do?
I liked seeing Insanity and Alorum get a chance. Now, the matchups were a little bit lopsided because the rune difference, and then this was when Golden Guardians was really not playing too well, but this was a really good showing. Now, they played a whole weekend, but they really didn't play 2 games. When they were up against Cloud9, it was kind of the same ordeal where every Cloud9 game ends up being just an absolute stomp. So what we saw from them is hard to pin on everybody because every single team, if we judge them on their performance against Cloud9, we would not be very excited about it.
Yeah. To say the least, All right, well, let's talk about a couple of the teams who are making changes that we have yet to see. The first one would be Dignitas here. Dardoch and Phoenix being the starters coming in here today, replacing Acadian and Froggen. Mark?
Yeah, they've been a long-time mid-jungle duo, actually. Back in 2016 spring, when Dardoch made his debut, it was with Phoenix. They played in the 3rd, 4th place match that spring. They also comboed together on Echo Fox in 2018. That time, they actually won the 3rd place match, in Miami. And so they have a history of dealing okay together. It doesn't seem consistency seems like the part that they struggle with. So I can see, Dignitas hoping they can reclaim some of that former glory that those two players were able to have. And they're also comboed with Lorlo now on the top side, who was also on that 2016 TL roster.
Now, this kind of rehashes or reintroduces a topic of conversation that has generated a lot of steam over the last couple weeks, and that's the conversation around academy, veterans, rookies, how they should be utilized. When do you reach towards that academy roster to make changes, and more so than having the argument about when and where you should do that, I have more of a curiosity around which players deserve that look. So when we take a look at Academy holistically, who are the guys who should be looked at, whether it's for the team that they are on the Academy roster for or another team should be looking to pick them up? Crumbs, what do you lean towards?
Right now, I'm leaning towards 3 teams that are super strong. That's TSM Academy, Cloud9 Academy, and Evil Geniuses Academy. I think these 3 teams have a ton of talent in and of themselves. But if you want to go into very specific players that I think are completely overlooked, I'm going to go towards Cloud9 in the top lane. I think that Fudge has been a very strong player for this roster. Now, remember, Cloud9 Academy won last spring split in a 3-0 fashion against EG Academy, and they started slow since they lost their bottom laner King, but finally they managed to add Tomo, which out of nowhere showed up to be a great player as well. So this team just has a knack for finding players that people are perhaps not taking a look at and just building them up to be really strong players. I'd love to see where Fudge stacks in the LCS competition, and I made a tweet yesterday that I stand by, that I think that those 3 teams I mentioned would be top 6 LCS teams right now.
Wow. Mark?
Bold prediction. I'll tangent off that because I don't know if I agree, but I think another person to look out for is Treats. He's been on TSM for a little while now, and he's done super, super well. And I think there are some teams who could look at him moving forward in their support position just to get a younger, fresher face into the LCS.
Yeah, now, Crumbs, you mentioned a few of those teams at the top of the Academy, the standings. I think it's important to note that there's a bit of a mirroring happening between the 2 leagues. It's Cloud9 well out in front of a pack of teams kind of jostling for second place in the LCS. It's TSM Academy that is doing exactly the same thing, standing at 7-1 at the end of week 4. But a very impressive showing from them, and Cloud9 surging in the middle of the split as we expect them to do to challenge towards the end. Very curious to see if any of those Academy players get a shot as the season develops, but it's time for us to turn our attention to the top half of the standings here in the LCS, and we have that collection of second-place teams, each with very distinct styles that they're beginning to bring out onto the Rift and showcase. And so in that quest for challenging at the top spot, I thought it would be wise for us to identify each of these teams stylistically and go from there in terms of figuring out who we think has the best shot of challenging for top 2. So I want to start with Evil Geniuses. Crumbs, what's their identity?
I think ever since we saw Jizuke holding a flamethrower, maniacally just using it, we've just locked into this is a mad scientist team with Jizuke at the helm. Now, they started with the experiment of taking a bunch of pieces that worked for Cloud9 before and just giving it their own twist, with Jizuke just being the crazy guy driving the ship, because so much of the game revolves around what can he do. A lot of last split was him single-handedly carrying a lot of team fights, carrying a lot of the early to mid game as well. So I think that with Jizuke at the helm, there's a lot of experimentation. Now, that means the Karma and the Kassadin comes out, which might not have been the greatest of experiments, but that is what a mad scientist is known for trying a lot of things, and maybe not all of them work, but the ones that do really stick in your head.
But you were the one telling them not to go for the Karma mid. I was encouraging all the experimentation. And then, once you see it's a bad experiment, make the notes, tuck it away, and never talk about it again.
I respect the fact they had to try it.
Yeah, observing the mad scientist, you think he's crazy the whole time, but that scientist is like, no, I'm doing right by the world, I'm just mixing these potions, and that's exactly what Jizuke does.
Right. Exploring all the options so that other people don't have to, right? Yeah, I'll set my lab on fire so that you don't have to do the same. Well, while EG continues to try new strategies and find what works for them, I want to flip over to Team Liquid because they seem to have a completely different approach, Mark, to the game.
Yeah, but I would call them all reliable. They like what they know they like. They don't want to change for nothing, and they're going to win with it. Jensen leading it up in the mid lane.
In the Wild West.
Yeah, I love it. They're still playing the same 3 champs in the top lane for Impact. You got Mordekaiser, Ornn, and Aatrox. They got Azir, Orianna, and stuff in the mid lane. Brox is on Trundle and Lee Sin. They're pretty much playing their tried and true stuff, and they execute well on it. They're a team that seems to like to do things by the book, so to speak, and they want the controlled game plan. They're not popping off in the early game, going for every fight that they see like some of the other teams that are 4-2 around them, and it's a very distinct play style to the others.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to argue, right, with the thing that has been tried and true and has worked all along. I guess the question becomes, is that a sustainable method as the game continues to evolve and change?
Well, we'll see if they nerf how much more they nerf Ornn. I don't know if this knocked him out of contention quite yet.
All right. Questions to be answered there. Another one of our top teams, in fact, second place from spring, was FlyQuest, and they have, impressed us with their showing in spring, continued to impress us here in summer. But, probably, do you feel like they've nailed down a little bit more of an individual identity?
Yeah, if I had to personify them, I would put them as the Fly Musketeers.
The Fly
Musketeers. Just mash some words together. But yeah, so this team came out in spring performing really well, and most notably their style was a very slow style. But I think just like the Musketeers, they have a little crusade to, change the world, and they changed how they've played. And in summer, they're a lot more aggressive, and this is usually head off by Power of Evil and Santorn. And I'll even throw Ignar in there as the three Musketeers to kind of, tie that trifecta of aggression that they've been bringing in summer.
There is the revolving door of AD right now that we're not too sure on, because they're still sticking with MASH, but could Wild Turtle return as well? So maybe they have the fifth Musketeer that just kind of comes and goes. There's someone that just continues to rotate.
It's the sequel.
Right, yeah. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
That could spell disaster and infighting if they're trying to replace one of the Musketeers, or they're just going to, 5.5 or something like that. One more team to talk about in that clump of teams fighting for second, and that would be TSM. I'll take a crack at this one. To me, TSM feels like a Jackson Pollock painting. At first glance, the first time this popped up into the art world in the market, high art, baby. Where people are shoveling millions at an opportunity to own a Pollock. And it worked. It worked at one point. But now it feels like they're just trying to create the same thing by throwing more paint at a canvas and hoping that we're still going to sit there and call it high art. I'm looking at Bjergsen as the mainstay. Obviously, he's a big part of this organization. He's a big part of the brand. And he is, of course, a brilliant player. But is there enough reason behind rehashing pieces of an old team that won you a championship in hopes that in this era of League of Legends you can still do the same and that people are still going to sit here and call it high art?
But they got Spica and they got Broken Blade now. It's a different lineup. What is that? New brushstrokes, new colors and paints?
Right? I've not seen any technique change. It still kind of feels like, that's all it was. It was a color.
Just look at their wins and look at their gold graphs. Sure, there's like lines going everywhere, and sure, it's a win, but is it really a win if it's like going everywhere? You don't really understand it. It's like an abstract gold graph.
It's right, the 100 Thieves win was abstract for sure.
Right. Oh, Lord. I like the idea that TSM's identity is actually just all of their gold graphs laid on top of each other, and boom, you get a Jackson Pollock painting. We're going to take a quick breather. When we return, there's more Countdown. Before we go, though, next week, many rivalries clash, not least of which is the headliner between Cloud9 and TSM.
Against C9, it's definitely going to be the hardest match. When we play against each other, things that don't happen usually in games happen.
Tyrus is in the middle. It's exactly where he wants to be. Locking up the Iron Solari comes out. Sneaky! Everybody's trying to disperse. Double kill coming in for Sneaky. They have no vision, and Reggie used his playful trickster. Means he's vulnerable. Ooh, there's some Stand United is down. They should be able to. No, he doesn't even get it. Cloud9 does not drop a single game in the playoffs.
3-0 against TSM here on this stage. Tell me about that.
Feels pretty damn good, dude. They're our good friends, and we took them down.
Gotta hit the Nexus with their eyes on the Nexus. Their eyes on the Summer Split. The best team in North America.
Welcome back to the LCS, where we're kicking off our Saturday with Golden Guardians versus TSM. We're going to follow that up by the refreshed rosters of Dignitas and 100 Thieves facing off, with Evil Geniuses going up against FlyQuest before we close things out with TL versus Immortals. Now, in Game 3, we have a battle between good and evil as FlyQuest faces Evil Geniuses, and that can look different in a game like League of Legends. So I've come up with some in-game scenarios to see how these analysts would choose to navigate them, whether or not they are truly good or truly evil at heart. So first up, the scenario is this. You are the jungler for your team. You're playing blue side, and you are on the bottom side of the map. You have just killed the enemy jungler on the bot side. Now, you have 6 camps up on your side. All 6 of your camps are up. On his side of the map, though, his red is about to spawn on the top side of the map. What do you do?
All chat, Diffie and the Jiffy.
But then what do you do? Is that it?
Okay, that's it.
Successful?
And then he hits slash dance in the river. Diffie and the Jiffy. All right. Okay. Well, Crumbs is evil at heart. We know that much.
For me, I would definitely go for the red buff. I had this period where I played Lee Sin, and I went my red to their red, I think like 20 games in a row, just to see what would happen. You know, I was collecting data, so I'm definitely going to his red and trying
No matter
to
how
kill him
long
again.
it takes for him to get there?
Doesn't matter. If I'm level 2 and he's level 2, but I kill him again, I'm still ahead.
Just
all that
as
matters.
useless as Mark.
Probably. What are you doing in this situation?
I mean, being more realistic, if you just kill the enemy jungler and you have all your camps, you should reset and take your camps. But you need to all chat and say, like, hey, come to your red, winky face. And he'll never go there. And you can have your nice, efficient path now.
So probably just mind game. He just achieved both in one step. I'm going to mind game him out of his red, but I'm also going to have the efficiency to pick up my camps. I like that answer. All righty, next up. You see someone clearing your pink ward across map. Now, you're sitting in the mid lane with absolutely nothing to do. The waves have not met. There is no wave for you to hit the enemy turret, so you are simply sitting there with nothing to do. On his last auto attack for that pink ward, what do you do?
This is a trick question. I don't have pink wards. I don't buy them. I don't have anything to drop. I can't do anything with this. You know, my pink ward. I don't know how that first one got there. Somehow I must have bought it and forgot what I was doing.
My goodness, he bought one to satisfy his coach, and that was it.
Yeah,
I'm in line with Mark here. I'll let the ward die, and I'll tell my team, guys, clearly that was my last ward, so I'm going to just be using all my gold to get my items at this point. They don't live forever, so my items do.
They're not team players. Probably help me out here. Help me out here, my friend.
I'll be honest. I think in all my game time playing, I've never gotten to watch my pink ward die because I've never paid attention to it. So in this case, we're watching someone kill it, and it's like, I've never done that. I don't know how I'd react. Like, when it happens to me, and I do remember those times, it pains me a lot, so maybe I would try to get revenge, but I've never cared about my pink ward.
Here's a good one, actually. Here's a good one. I've actually done this one, too. They're killing it. You drop another one right next to it, so then they start killing that one, and then you gank them, and you kill them right there.
Okay, so you drop a second in range and then bait them into another fight. My goodness. I like probably his honesty and his awareness around the map, saying I wouldn't even have known it was going to happening. All right, next up. You're in lane, laning against your lane opponent. Let's call it mid lane. Your opponent misses 3 CS in a row. You have 2 options. Do you flash the thumbs up to be encouraging to your opponent that perhaps he could get the 4th CS and stabilize? Or do you flash the sad B to get into his head and let him know that you just saw him miss those 3 CS in a row?
I'm sad B for sure. I'm spamming every emote that I have on my wheel just constantly in lane phase.
It's incessant from Mark. What about you two?
I think I would miss my own 3 CS and then give him the thumbs up.
So Crumbs purposefully misses the next 3 CS to even the score and then tosses him the thumbs up. I can't tell if that's BM or good. You know, is that good? Is that good or evil? Where's the verdict on that?
It's coming
That's
from a
just
BM
bad
heart.
play.
It's inting, isn't it? Can't you get reported for that?
That's reportable. Oh, my God. Okay. Well, it's a good answer, though. All right, we got a 4th and final scenario here. You're the jungler for your team. Second blue buff spawns, around that level 6, as every good jungler does in competitive play. You hand this off to your mid laner. They promptly take that blue buff to the mid lane and feed it over to their lane opponent. So now we fast forward a few minutes further into the game. Another blue buff is spawning. As the jungler, what do you do?
This was complicated, but here's what you do, right? You tell him, hey, come over, I'm going to leash you blue. You accidentally take it, and then you say, don't worry, we're going to go invade. I'll get you the opponent's blue buff.
Okay, oh, perfect.
But you know the opponent's blue buff is not up, so that's it.
For me, I probably muted that person like right after they died, and I'm just taking the next one and playing totally dumb. I'm taking that blue, and I'm trying to solo carry that game.
Oh, I love it. Probably?
I mean... honestly, if my mid laner died, you're not getting blue buff until you farm and survive a bit. If you're like 0-1, like you don't get that blue. Maybe next blue when you have more ability power than I do.
Prove your value. All right, fair enough. Some thoughts on good and evil plays within the games of League of Legends. Whether or not they exhibit their good or evil tendencies here today, though, this is a battle at the top of the standings, and it has an explosive matchup in the mid lane as Jizuke faces off against Power of Evil.
This is a really hype matchup between these two guys. They are pillars for both teams, but they have quite different playstyles. Power of Evil still really favoring those control mages, whereas Jizuke is still experimenting quite a bit more. We've seen a lot more Twisted Fate from Evil Geniuses, so a lot of it comes down to how early Jizuke wants to be influencing the map, whereas PoE all reliable. You know that if he hits late game with the Orianas, with the Azirs, Cassiopeia, whatever he wants to play, you know that he can bust it out and be very efficient. Now, the one thing that I'll get to PoE, he can actually play a lot of these other champions, he just chooses not to.
And I think for this split, PoE has been better than Jizuke. Last split, Jizuke was second All-Pro, PoE was third team All-Pro. But in playoffs, PoE was able to keep Jizuke in check. And so far this split, he has much better laning phase in terms of CSD. He's more active on the map at kills and assists at 15. He is getting a little bit more jungler attention from Santorin, but I think he's done a great job of continuing to revamp his playstyle. He started last split when he was picking like the Rumble mid and these kinds of things, and now even on control mages, he's still fighting a little bit more. So I've been very impressed with FlyQuest able to update their playstyle a little bit and get more aggressive and fast paced in summer than they were in spring.
Power of Evil, an integral part of FlyQuest wins even in spring. Mark arguing that he's leveled up a little bit here in summer, but probably we can't ignore the other change that was made back in spring. In the midst of playoffs, Solo coming in for FlyQuest. Let's look at that top lane matchup here today against Kumo.
Yeah, Solo coming in for FlyQuest was huge. It was at the end of the spring regular season, and he started in the playoffs, and you could really tell this team transformed a bit, where their early game was usually very slow, and then they had a bit more direction once Solo came in. So he was definitely a big part of how they kind of leveled up their gameplay, and even coming into summer being more aggressive. But on the other side, Kumo in spring was one of the worst top laners. I think almost all of us, were very critical of how he played, but in summer he stepped up so much. He's bringing out kind of new picks. He's also been really on top of these teleports that you're seeing, which is like a much bigger part of the meta right now. It's just all around, Kumo's been playing much better. This is actually the funny ones where he's actually able to kind of what's the word? Crush inside the own jungle.
Collapse.
What's the word? Collapse inside their own jungle. But yeah, his movements in the game were actually a lot better. When before you'd see them kind of being like lethargic movements around, but now you actually see him react pretty quickly to these plays.
Yeah, he's actually. Oh, go ahead, Mark. Sorry.
I was gonna say he's actually #1 in CSD at 10 in the league for top laners, which is super impressive considering what Prawley was talking about last split and his laning phase often being the weakest part of his gameplay. And he still reacts well in team situations.
Yeah, Crumbs, I think what's really interesting about this for me is that no one's making the argument, that anyone has fallen in their level. So when we're looking at that mid lane matchup, it's identified, hey, Power of Evil just seems to be playing better in summer than he was in spring, but that is not to throw any criticism or shade towards Jizuke. But where FlyQuest may have leveled up slightly in the mid lane, it appears that EG is set up for far more success with Kumo now in the top lane. So how do you expect these two teams to interact now, given the different level ups they've made in different lanes?
I think the interaction is going to be very similar to the game that FlyQuest had against Dignitas, where they let Twisted Fate go through. So they were dealing with globals with the classic PoE champions, but being very proactive around pressuring the mid lane and being able to roam to the side lanes when the globals came out. Now, the statistics for Jizuke looked a lot worse because of the schlackings they took against Cloud9. Now, for FlyQuest, I really think that the champions that you can have in the mid lane can pressure a lot of these global picks, and it just depends on how well you can play in your mid 2v2 to make sure that you can contain these semi-global ranges and then allow yourself to farm and eventually outscale, because the globals are a lot weaker in team fights. So as long as FlyQuest can get to those stages and survive the early game, then I think they'll be in a good spot.
I'm curious to color this conversation with your guys' predictions for the day. Putting a spotlight on this matchup in particular, but let's take a look at them all, see where y'all fall. It will be TSM across the board in the top of the day. The only difference coming in that second game of the day, 100 for Prawley over Dignitas. But again, I want to hyper-focus in on this game 3 because all three of you have confidence in Evil Geniuses, even as we talk about this series being close.
Yeah, I thought we would be more split
surprised
on this. Yeah. For me, it's actually more to do with some of the bot lane stuff and the changes going on there. I think Bang and Zeyzal have been very good this split as well, even though we didn't talk about them. I think they've been much better than Mash and Ignar, even though Ignar is still having big plays, and that's why I actually lean towards EG.
Yeah, I just think EG's kind of kryptonite is, they're going to do the Karma again or the Cassin. Like, I think if they have their draft put together, I think they're a bit stronger of a team right now, so that's why I give them the edge there.
All right, fair enough. Now, we do have a new school of challenger dipping into the predictions game for this week. The FlyQuest Fish Tank Sequest predictions. Here they are. Let's take a quick look. We got TSM 100 Thieves, so probably is getting the backing from the FlyQuest Fish, and the Fish are the only ones who have faith in their own team there in Game 3 of the day.
They were getting this wrong.
What kind
are you guys nervous about your predictions
What
now?
kind of fish are these, first of all? Do we know?
All right. I think they vary in their type and origin, Crumbs. I don't know for certain. There's probably a goldfish in there somewhere. But other than that, I couldn't tell you.
Does the type of fish affect the predictions?
Big time. Goldfish have a very short memory, whereas you can have like a Siamese fish that are just sprawling all over and fighting.
Oh my!
Those are the ones
like
that are good at
intelligent
predictions. The
marine
octopus.
creature.
Doesn't matter what kind of fish. The point is, the fish are 9-3 so far in their predictions at the moment. They started hot with 8-0, but that means more recently they've taken a dive. So I wonder if they'll be able to extend their winning record here today. It's a curiosity, to say the least. But that being said, we got to wait till Game 3 of the day for that one. Before it comes Game 1. TSM versus the Golden Guardians is coming up. So let's hand things over to the casters, Riv and Azael, to get us a preview.
Happy 4th of July!
Happy 4th of July!